You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
Call to meeting the MPOJC Urbanized Area Planning Policy Board meeting of Wednesday, January 25th. I want to recognize alternates. We got Ryan Heyer here for Amy Nielsen from North Liberty, and Dottie Maher here for Wally Heitman from University Heights. Okay. Consider approval of the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dickens, seconded by Donahue. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Set next board meeting dates, time, and location. Basically, we're kind of locked into March 29th based on some things that we need to approve. So Kent has that down and tentatively hosted by North Liberty.
Gotcha.
Okay, Terry's got that.
Again, please?
March 29th.
Thank you.
Okay. Public discussion. Kent, you had a couple of items, I believe?
Yeah, I did. First thing I wanted to mention was that I've been asked that we all speak into microphones. We're a few short tonight, so we can share, and I said I would pass that along. The second thing I want to do quickly was just quickly recognize Wally Heitman, who's resigned as mayor of the University Heights. Wally served on the board for 1 year, did a very nice job, and just on a personal note, I always enjoyed working with Wally, and he was really interested in what we did and was very active. Same thing for Amy Nielsen. Amy Nielsen served 2 terms on our board, or 2 years on our board. Same for Amy. I always really enjoyed working with her. She was always very involved, and I'll miss working with both of them.
Okay. Thank you, Kent. Anybody from the public who would like to speak?
I guess I should talk in this line. I just wanted to let you all know that DOT was in to meet with Johnson County this morning about the widening of Interstate 80 and the plans for that. And so they were probably with us for, I don't know, maybe almost 2 hours, hour and a half, going over all the plans. They said that we were the first county. I don't know if that meant because we would grill them the most. But it is, currently, their plan is from Iowa City to West Branch, 2 of the 3 bridges would remain and the 3rd one would be torn down. And so this, based on the fact that Iowa City is moving east and West Branch is moving west, that could be a problem. And so we'll keep you informed of that. There is a way to protest it and try to make them aware of additional facts. And that happened and kept one bridge open, the Wapsie Avenue Bridge. But the one farther to the east, which is called Lower West Branch Road, the one closest to West Branch, is currently going to be closed. And so we will have an opportunity to comment about that. But going to 6 lanes on I-80, the construction is scheduled to start in 2021, and it will take 4 years. And so we all got a lot of information, and I'm sure DOT will be talking to a variety of you, but I just wanted to let you know that. And if we get some data, we'll be asking the MPO for assistance on whether or not that bridge should stay open. And if we feel that it should, we will probably be asking you to help add some comments to that. So that's my update on that.
Thank you, John.
Additionally, there would be, for us to keep that bridge open, there would probably be some cost share on that. The other bridge, they'll probably build on their own, the Wapsie Avenue Bridge. And we are also on our 5-year road plan, we have the reconstruction of Herbert Hoover Highway from pretty much the city limits of Iowa City all the way up, all the way to the county line, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Or do we start at the intersection? Starts at Sharpless. And so we not only, the current plans are to widen the road and put shoulders on it, and also to possibly a separated bike path in the right of way.
Okay. Anybody else for public discussion? Okay. Moving on to item number 3A, report from the nominating committee for the 2017 MPOJC board officers.
Yeah, thank you. As you remember at your November meeting, you appointed a 3-person nominating committee. to nominate the chair and vice chair for the 2017 Urbanized Area Policy Board. The committee was comprised of Jill Dodds from Coralville, Janelle Reddig with the county, as well as Rockney Cole from the city, and I want to thank each of the three of them for their work on that. As director, it's been my practice to meet with the chair prior to each meeting and/or discuss major work activities with the chair. Of course, when the chair is not present, the vice chair takes that seat. Currently, as you know, Susan is the chair. She served 1 year for a maximum, there's a maximum of bylaws of 2 years. Steve Berner, Mayor of Tiffin, also has served 1 year as vice chair, and again, there's a 2-year term limit for that position as well. And I'd ask anyone on the nominating committee at this point to help us out and let us know what you decided.
We're all laughing because we had extensive meetings and discussion, and it took a long time to us to come to the conclusion that we would recommend that we reappoint Susan as chair and Steve as vice chair.
Second.
And thank you for thanking us. We were so exhausted at the end of this extensive search.
I will say it was the most efficient search I think that I've ever been a part of.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Before they change their
Thank
minds.
you.
Yeah, before we change our minds.
Thank you.
The easiest one I've ever done. It's like, you want me, I'll do it. If you don't, I won't. It works either way. All right, moving on to 3B. Consider approval of the FY18 MPOJC budget and financial forecast.
Yeah, thank you. The proposed FY18 budget and forecast is attached in your packet for review. The primary focus of the MPO remains to fulfill federal and state requirements necessary for the MPO to receive our federal funding. As you'll remember, MPOJC is organized as a division of the City of Iowa City, Neighborhood and Development Services Department, and MPO staff also serve as NDS staff in that capacity. Personnel costs are determined by the collective bargaining agreement between Iowa City and the American Federation of State and County Municipal Employees, or AFSCME, as we all know it. The overall budget is approximately $599,000, and it reflects an approximate 4% increase from FY17, primarily due to merit wage increases for staff, and primarily due to healthcare costs, I should say. After accounting for staff time devoted solely to the City of Iowa City functions, the assessments are population-based. And due to ongoing use of carryover funds and estimated DOT funds that we'll be using, proposed assessment to the entities are only slightly increased for FY18. For the larger communities, it's about half of 1% increase, except for North Liberty, because they had their special census and their numbers increased dramatically. And for North Liberty, it's about a $5,000 increase in their assessment over years past. My annual caveat is that even with recently approved transportation federal legislation, I still remain concerned for various reasons about government shutdowns, shortages of funding, and so forth. So we will remain cognizant of that, and I'll make sure to keep this board updated if and when necessary. What we'd like from you tonight is that you please consider approval of the budget and financial forecast, and with approval, I'll forward the assessment schedule to your staffs. I didn't intend to go through the budget in any great detail tonight because it's, for the most part, status quo from years before, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Anybody have any questions for Kent? You know, I would just echo what Kent said. When you look at this budget and the fact that the $200,000 from the Iowa DOT is 46.6% of this budget, that is really significant. So depending what happens on the state and federal level, that could seriously impact our budget, our revenue for our budget.
Right. We carry about a $300,000 reserve. I've spoken quite a bit to the financial director, the finance director in Iowa City. They really like us to keep about 30% of our total budget. So we're quite a ways past that, and that's why we're spending down some of our carryover. But ultimately, we, by all accounts, should be having, $150,000 or so in our account for this sort of shortfall, should a shortfall occur.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes. 3C, consider approval of the FY18 Johnson County assessments to the East Central Iowa Council of Governments. Kent?
Thanks. As we've done for many years now, MPOJC collects the East Central Iowa Council of Governments, or ECOG, as they're known, dues for Johnson County entities, and then forwards those funds on to ECOG. So we're just a pass-through, a collection agency, so to speak, for that. ECOG assessments are calculated on a per capita basis for Johnson County. We then, in turn, assess each individual municipality per capita. We collect the money up, forward it onto the East Central Iowa Council of Governments. They have proposed a 2% rate increase for all counties that it serves this year, and that's reflected in the assessment schedule that's attached in your packets. As many of you are familiar, they are the designated regional planning affiliation for East Central Iowa, including Benton, Cedar, Iowa, Johnson, Jones, Lynn, Tama, and Washington counties. They're very busy. They primarily provide planning and grant administrative services in the areas of community economic development, housing, transportation, solid waste, and so forth. So they cover a lot more in areas than the MPO does. We're primarily transportation, as you know. What we'd like from the board tonight is that you please consider approval of the FY18 East Central Iowa Council of Governments assessment schedule. Again, with your approval, I'll forward those on to your staffs. I'm happy to try and answer any questions you have about the budget, but Jennifer Fensel with ECOG is also here tonight if you have any questions.
Can we get a motion to approve?
Seconded.
A little slow here. Moved by Rockne Cole, seconded by Janelle Reddig. Any discussion or questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Approved. 3D, consider appointments to the ECOG Board of Directors. Kent?
Thanks. At your November meeting, we discussed the entities responsible for appointments to the ECOG Board of Directors for 2017. Per our bylaws, the entities that were to appoint elected officials this year included Johnson County, Coralville, and Hills. The appointees that I received from each community include Mike Carberry, supervisor with Board of Supervisors. All of the supervisors function as alternates in the case Mike can't be there. For Coralville, it's Lori Goodrich on City Council with Mayor John Lundell as the alternate. For Hills, it's Kathy Niebel of the City Council with Kathy Fitzmaurice Hill, the City Administrator, serving as her alternate. And I did contact Aaron Meniza at the direction of the board as the citizen representative, and he has kindly accepted a second year should you approve that this evening. I think he's been doing a great job. So what we'd like from the board tonight is that you please consider approval of the elected officials as stated, as well as a second term for Aaron Meniza as citizen representative. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Can we get a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion from Jill and a second from Steve. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, you keep a list of alternates that could fill in for any of these people. Do we have to send that list to ECICOG or?
Yeah, I've already sent that list on to them, knowing that it wasn't approved yet, but as a tentative list.
So like, are we all on the alternate list, or how do you come up with that alternate list?
Well, the alternate list is really alternates from the three groups that are forwarding board directors this year. So in this case, it was, all the supervisors, John Lundell, and then the city administrator for Hills. So we forward that on to ECOG. We don't really have anyone else in mind besides that. We will go through all of those alternates first, and then.
In the past, the Board of Supervisors has like served as an alternate for a city.
Right.
And that still could happen, right?
Correct. Per our bylaws, yeah. Any elected official from any community can serve at the request of another entity.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. And if we can't find anybody then we can go to staff, but we prefer elected officials. So to be honest, I think this is a great thing that we do, by the way, in recognizing alternates and making sure we have that list. But to be honest, I think all of our folks that have sat on the board of directors have really done a pretty good job of getting there. And I think in the last few years, I can only remember a time or two where we had to, really find an alternate.
I think I went twice.
Yeah.
As an alternate in 2
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So I think, we really have good participation, which is a testament to those that we're appointing to the East Central Iowa Council of Governments. So you're to be commended for that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
Any
you.
other questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes. Thank you very much. 3E, discuss the MPOJC orientation opportunity for board members. Kent?
Yeah, this item was really meant, I wasn't sure if we'd have a University Heights, someone appointed from University Heights or North Liberty yet, and I know both communities are working on finding an appointee for this group. But I will offer an orientation to any current board members that would like a refresher or that maybe got on the board and couldn't partake in a past year. We usually sit down for about an hour and I discuss what it is the MPO does, why we exist, and so forth. So I will offer that to anybody in this group. Make sure to let me know if you want to get in on that orientation, but I will follow up with North Liberty and University Heights when they do appoint folks and make sure that they get that opportunity as well.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Moving on, to item 4, transportation planning. 4A, consider approval of Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 Transit Operating Formula. Brad?
Yeah, Brad Newman, Assistant Transportation Planner. This is our annual apportionment of our Section 5307 FTA funding. The MPO this year has over $2.6 million to apportion between Iowa City Transit, Coralville Transit, and the University of Iowa CAN bus. We apportion that based on a formula, has 4 factors: operating cost, locally determined income, revenue miles, and fare revenue. This formula was reviewed by the board in September and no changes were recommended. Attached to your memo is the apportionment table as well as the FY16 table so you can compare the changes between the last 2 years. These formula numbers are approved by DOT. Every year, we report quarterly numbers to the DOT, and then the year-end numbers we use in this formula. The approved data is attached in the form of the performance statistics. We have these statistics back to 1994, I believe, so we've been tracking them a long time. We'll have to get you some trend lines on some ridership and costs pretty soon. TAC recommended to approve unanimously, and we're asking you to approve the apportionment.
Can we get a motion, please?
So move.
Got a motion by John, second by Mike. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 4B has been withdrawn at the request of the Iowa DOT, so we'll move
Correct.
on to 4C. Update on the fiscal year 21 to 22 surface transportation block grant and transportation alternative set-aside grant funding allocation process. Kent?
Thank you. Typically, the MPO conducts our competitive grant process for our surface transportation block grant funds as well as our transportation alternative funds every other year. That biennial process has really been the desire historically from the board and the technical advisory committee, so that we'll have 2 years of funding to apply to essentially fund larger projects, or more fully fund projects might be another way to look at that. Given that we did not go through the funding process last year, staff has been anticipating going through that process this spring. However, due to some changes in the federal transportation legislation, the Iowa DOT did recently let us know that there would be changes to the Transportation Alternatives Program and the way that it's administered. So the larger pot of funds, the surface transportation block grant funds, we still plan to administer this spring, but that Transportation Alternatives Program funding will be due later. Well, we'll go through the process this summer and it'll be due in October of this year. With the information that I have available, I'm recommending that we conduct our standard process, as I mentioned, this spring for the SDBG funds, and then again anticipate that funding process for the TA funds later this year. I don't have all the details about how that will work. My understanding is that the DOT would like for us to still go through our typical process, but then our applications would actually be sent to them for approval. And again, I don't know what that'll look like, but typically that Transportation Alternatives Program funds would operate the same as the process we'll go through this spring, where we send out applications, we receive the applications back from all the different communities, we give you scoring recommendations, and then the board essentially allocates the funds. So there's gonna be one extra step in it this year, and we'll have to go through the process twice, unfortunately. I think in the long run, it behooves us to have those two processes run concurrently again for better project planning and to streamline the application process, frankly. There's also an issue where The larger pot of funds that are typically used for roads can also be spent on trails, sidewalks, and safe routes to schools type projects. So when we're not looking at all those applications at the same time, that sort of takes that option to spend some of those funds on other projects as well. The process will follow the tentative timeline that was provided for you in your memo. I did want to mention just a couple dates. January 30th or maybe January 31st, we are anticipating getting the applications out to all of the technical advisory committee members. So if you have projects, surface transportation block grant, that's primarily road funds. If you have projects in mind, whether it's on your 5-year CIP or 5-year county roads, make sure to talk to your TAC members about that because we'll be getting those to them very, very soon. There'll be about a 3-week turnaround on those, so it's a pretty quick process because then in March, we'll be bringing you recommendations to allocate those funds. So that March meeting will be an important meeting to attend. Again, I mentioned in the future, I think it'd be nice to align those two processes, but that won't happen this year. We've not yet received our target funds either. Normally at this period of time, the DOT's provided our actual targets, the amounts we'll have available. We should be getting those in the next week or so, but I anticipate roughly $5.5 million, maybe $5.6 million available. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I did bring this up with we did cover this with the Technical Advisory Committee last week, and they really didn't see any issues with it.
Any questions for Kent? All right, thank you. Moving on to 4D, update on the MPOJC fiscal year 17 transportation planning work program and the fiscal year 17 to 20 transportation improvement program. Brad?
The work program, again, is a annual document. It identifies all the major work projects for the MPO for FY28 in this, or FY18, sorry, not 28, getting ahead of myself. 2018 in this situation. The work program includes all state and federally required planning processes and documentation, ongoing and routine projects and special projects requested by member entities. We will soon be soliciting for those projects here in February. Feel free to talk to any of the MPO staff on any requests you may have. And I believe we will be approving the work program by April 1, or it has to be to FTA,
the draft.
FHWA, the draft. Correct. By April 1, and then the program will be approved in May.
Okay.
So TIP, Kent covered most of that. Like he said, we'll have about $6.5 million for the STBG program. And that'll cover years 21 and 22. So when we do our TIP, which is only 18 to 21, we'll have a year that won't be included, but we'll include it in the following years, as well as the transportation alternative set aside will be in the 19 version instead of the 18. This board will approve or will adopt the TIP in July. Is there any questions? I think Kent covered most of the TIP issues.
Yeah, so the way it works is that when we go through this funding process this spring that I just discussed, when we make those funding allocations in March, the board will actually make those allocations. They actually get programmed in the TIP. That's our official programming document with the DOT and the feds. So it's just one step after another, and that's why we won't have a long time to turn those applications around. We usually only have one meeting where we actually discuss allocating those funds, because then we've got to turn around and get the TIP approved as well. So it's kind of a quick process.
Any questions for Brad or Kent on that one? Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to 4E, update on the MPOJC Long Range Transportation Plan revision schedule and draft materials. Darian.
Hi. Thanks, Susan. We have been very busy updating our long-range transportation plan, as we've given you updates every meeting for the last about 2 years now, and we are on the home stretch. We have about 5 months left in our process. Right now, we've been spending a considerable amount of time updating our travel demand model with the DOT. This is the model that we use to create traffic forecasts, which we actually do quite a bit of in this area because we're growing so much, so it's a really important tool for us. So we're tying up the loose ends and getting that underway and ready to be used. We are also, of course, drafting content for the plan, which we've included we've included 5 sections for you to review today. I'm going to walk you through a couple of the more important ones and highlight some of the things that I think are useful as policy decision makers and for your staffs. And there's a few that are probably less important, and we'll just leave those for you to read at your convenience, and you can feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions. And if you're following along in your packet, the first page that we've included is just simply an introduction, who we are in terms of the MPO, what does the board do, what are we responsible for, and just a little bit of background information about the long-range plan. And if you follow along to the next page, we just included a map of the metropolitan area as a visual reference, where we're at within the state of Iowa and where our municipalities are located adjacent to each other. We've also included a map that may be a good reference for those of you in this room, which is our functional classification map. All of the roads in the metro area have a classification that's been assigned to them by the federal government. And this identifies which roads essentially are eligible for federal funds. So there's about 500 miles of roadway, if you can believe it, in the entire metro area. About a third of them are eligible for federal funds. So this is a good resource to determine if you're looking for potential money for a project in your community, this is the place you go to determine if that road is eligible for federal funds. The next information we highlight in the regional context or our background section is just population growth. We're very lucky, I think, to be living in one of the areas of the state that's growing considerably. And we looked at population growth in two different respects. If you're following along in your memo, the graph in the bottom right-hand corner highlights population growth by community, and that's percentage growth. And it's probably no surprise to everybody here that North Liberty leads the metro area in terms of percentage growth at 37% between 2010 and 2014, which is pretty extraordinary. Tiffin also has a high amount of growth in terms of percentage growth between 2010 and 2014, the years we evaluated, at 26%. And the rest of the metro area is still has very strong growth between 7 and 8%. We also took another look at population growth in the metro area and said, okay, we know we have this many more people between 2010 and 2014. Where are those people living at? We think that's important to know where all the new people in the metro area reside. And when you look at it from that perspective, you find 44% of the new people in the metro area between 2010 and 2014 reside in Iowa City. 39% of those people live in North Liberty. Another 12% of that growth is in Coralville, and then 4% in Tiffin, and 1% in University Heights. So a little bit of a different picture of growth, but we wanted to include both of these to give you a sense of where people are moving to. The next page, just some more population statistics, and I won't go through all of these, but we did include some population projections, which you might find useful or interesting. The long-range plan horizon year, of course, is 2045, but we did some population projection for the interim years, so 2025, 2035, 2045. And if trends between 2000 and today essentially hold true, we'll have another 65,000 people in the metro area at the time this plan comes to fruition in 2045. That's another Iowa City almost, very close in terms of population growth. So something to definitely, we want to consider that in our transportation planning. Another thing I thought that was interesting is when you look at the metro area population in terms of the percentage of the population that lives in each community, you see it today, Iowa City has 63% of the population in the metro area. Coralville has 18%, North Liberty has 16%, Tiffin 2%, University Heights 1%. If you look in the year 2045, if current trends hold, you'll see a little bit of a different picture. Iowa City's is projected to make up 53% of the population. Coralville would remain approximately the same in terms of 8% or 18% if the trends hold true. North Liberty's proportion of the total population would increase to 26%. And you'd have Tiffin and University Heights would remain relatively similar in terms of their percentage of the overall population. So again, something to think about in terms of future transportation planning and just having a sense for where people may be living at in the metro area in the future.
Darren, I have a question. If this document was done 20 years ago, what would it have said the population of Johnson County should be? I mean, how accurate can these things get? Because I'm actually surprised that 2025 is only 165. Because, I mean, we grew 14,000 in 4 years, or 12,000. I mean, I think when I moved here, nobody thought at all North Liberty would be bigger than Coralville. I mean, North Liberty was just this little tiny city. So if you go back 20 years, this seems low to me. I don't, based on what everything is going on. So how do you guess?
I think, well, the data points that we used to do this, to develop these trends was the year 2000, 2010, and 2014. We could certainly take a look at what that looks like if you add 1990s census information in there, and that would give 2 census, or 3 full census periods, and then the 2014 census estimate, except for North Liberty, they have an official census in 2014. We can certainly take a look at it and see what the difference looks like. I'm not sure. I didn't run that analysis because we were trying to keep it relatively close to current trends.
Sure.
To help make sure that there aren't any significant outliers. But yeah, we can certainly take a look at it.
It actually seems low to me. There's 3 high-rises going up within eyeshot of here. The entire Scanlon Farms is going to be developed in this period, which is how many units?
800.
Yeah, so I just look at what is already being planned, and I'm like, it looks like we'll blow by this 165. I mean, in 10 years. And then that means we blow by all the other ones there, maybe or maybe not. I don't know. But anyway.
We can certainly take a look at it. We could add in another data point, essentially, another year's worth of.
It's almost like we
decades
need
worth
to
of
add
data.
in the 15 and 16 unknown data point based on building permits. I don't know. I mean, anyway, thanks.
It's a good point. We can certainly take a look at that. The next topic that we covered, we talked a little bit about household income because, of course, our transportation costs are relatively fixed. Those on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum end up paying a greater proportion of their total income for transportation costs. And so we wanted to include a map that just sort of highlighted the area graphically in terms of median income, so we can potentially point out areas that may be more challenged in terms of transportation costs. We also included on the following page a map in a very similar vein that graphically shows where the majority of the households with children are in the metro area. Anyone here who has children or has had children at home understands the amount of trips that children require nowadays, and in terms of school and daycare and activities and whatnot. So we really wanted to highlight where the majority of these families are at, although we know they're spread across the metro area, but maybe highlight some areas where there could be particular challenges related to family travel. The next 2 pages are sort of tied together, housing density and location of multifamily housing. Of course, areas where we have the greatest housing density, we want to make sure they're well served by our transportation network, so we wanted to highlight graphically where those areas are, so we can use that in our decision-making process. One of the more interesting pages to me is our journey to work page, and that's that follows our multifamily and our housing discussion. And this simply is a description of how people are getting to work. This is one of our consistent and best, I think, data sources we have in the metro area, especially for the municipalities that are maybe trying to encourage active transportation or encourage more transit use or encourage bicycling or walking. This would be the place where you'd want to come and see what's our baseline, how is our community performing right now. As a metro area, I can tell you that currently 73% of all work trips rely on an automobile. And to give you some sense of scale, the state of Iowa, that's 89%. So the metro area, probably not a big surprise to anyone at this table, but the metro area already has a significantly lower number of people who are reliant on an automobile for their work trips. We also have this information listed for each one of your communities if you wanted to reference it. And something else we found, just an interesting statistic, although it makes up a small percentage of the population, the number of people or the percentage of people who do not own vehicles is actually increasing. We saw it increase by 1/3, which we just thought was an interesting statistic. And I think that's due to the fact that people are finding bicycles and transit or walking are using Uber or Zipcar. They're finding these other alternatives to be more actually feasible for them in today's life. And also the built environment, I think there's pockets of development across the metro area where people can live at, and they can either work nearby, or there's amenities, there's restaurants, there's things like that, where people can choose these other active modes of transportation, and they aren't as reliant on their vehicles. The next page, we talk just a little bit about vehicle miles traveled, and if you're not familiar with vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, it's an estimate of the total miles traveled by all vehicles within a specific region each year. The DOT compiles this information for us. They take very extensive traffic counts every 4 years, and they use this to come up with a number or an estimate of all of the miles traveled by all of the vehicles in our county or in our metro area. We graph these so we can kind of take a look at where VMT is trending. Last year was an all-time high in terms of vehicle miles traveled, not just here in Johnson County, but really all over the place. There's many factors that go into that, one of which is fuel prices, which have been, I'm sure we would all agree, nicely lower than they have been in the last few years. That's one of the factors I think that's affecting that. But also income, household vehicle ownership, number and length of trips, cost of transportation in terms of time and money, and that sort of thing. Those all play a factor. What we use VMT for, and what we'll be relying on it more in the future, is we use it to basically understand how vehicle trends are moving or not moving. And from an environmental perspective, VMT is what is used to actually calculate the transportation effect on the environment in terms of emissions and environmental pollutants. So it's an important number. I've included them for each one of your communities. If this is something that your community is interested in and knowing what your baseline is, we'll include these in this long-range plan, and we'll be including them going forward. So that's something that you can track.
You know, it's interesting, Janelle, that you brought up the population figures, because they are no doubt important. But what Darian's just been describing with like the vehicle miles traveled and emissions and mode split is a big one for us. So the amount of people actually driving versus walking versus biking and that sort of thing. Those really are just about as important or more important for us than the actual population, because like Darian mentioned, our vehicle miles traveled is up this year per capita, but for the last 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, we've actually been heading in the good direction, which is less vehicle miles traveled. So it really has a little less to do with population for us than it does just some of these other statistics. But it would be interesting, to look back a little bit further and see if we can't hone in a little bit more on the population projections.
Sorry. It seems like an inconsistency to me, because means of transportation to work chart, it shows me that there are 9,300 workers in North Liberty and 10,600 in Coralville. But 89% drove a car, truck, or van to work in North Liberty, only 82% in Coralville. Okay, bear with me. Mm-hmm. Now you go down to your vehicle miles traveled. Coralville is almost 5 times as many vehicle miles traveled as North Liberty. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It's the retail shopping. This is my perspective.
So the vehicle miles traveled is not just the Coralville residents?
It's all vehicles that traveled in.
So if someone came from Illinois here, it would count as Coralville's vehicle miles traveled? Oh,
that's correct.
Thank you for clarifying that, because none of that made any sense to me.
I had to look a little bit into that when I first was looking at the data also. And I think, from my perspective, it's the retail and the commercial areas in Coralville is the reason why Coralville's VMT is so much higher. They're a regional draw for many things.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because we should add that clarification.
Yeah, we can certainly clarify
And I guess I have a quick comment, too. I guess I'm interested maybe to take one step back in terms of the commuting numbers for commuting by bike and the number of people that walk. They talk about Iowa City, for example, being 3.7% and 16% of people walking. Do we have a specific target that we're aiming for in terms of bicycle commuters? What's our overall goal, and how are we going to meet that need via our infrastructure?
That's a great question, and I think that's a very good policy question. I don't know if that's been necessarily decided, I know it will be a performance measure that the federal government is going to require that we evaluate. They have not set standards. It is unclear if they will set standards for those with the new administration.
Okay.
But it's certainly something that each community can certainly set for themselves. That's why we want to make sure this information is in here. So if the community does want to take this information and set some set some targets, set some goals in terms of how you want to make changes to the transportation network or policy changes or educational outreach, this would be what you could use as a baseline. And we could certainly provide additional reporting to keep tabs on how the mode split might be changing.
Thinking just very quickly related to that, have you guys ever done any economic assessment in terms of the impact on the local economy when you do have greater numbers of people that are biking and walking? They're not purchasing fuel, they're investing in that local economy. Is that in here? I guess I didn't see that.
That is not in here. We have not done that analysis from an MPO perspective. I know that some of that has been done on a national level, so that's research we could certainly provide.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Susan.
So the next topic I just want to briefly touch on, which I found to be very interesting, was generational differences, millennials, versus the baby boomers. This section is still under construction, as you could see. But one thing you keep hearing over and over again in transportation planning cycles, and actually now you hear it in the news, you're sort of getting a little bit of information from all over the place, but we're living in the midst of an interesting shift in how people travel. And nationally and here in Johnson County, we're finding that millennials are less reliant on automobiles and consistently are reporting greater attraction to less auto-intensive lifestyles. Which, if you put it in the context of our age cohorts here in the metro area, 42% of the population here in our metro area is millennials. Baby boomers are 15% of the population, and the folks that fall in between, which Gen Xers, I guess they would be called, makes up about 23%. So just to give you a sense of scale, if you will, we'll always have a number more millennials here in this metro area, I think due to the university. I think that's a big factor, but just something for us to consider. When we looked at the local data, the Johnson County data, baby boomers versus millennials, in terms of how are they getting around, how are they getting to work, what kinds of modes are they using, we found in 2013, baby boomers were driving about 84% of the time to work, where the millennials were driving about 65% of the time at work. So there's about a 20% gap in terms of using vehicles to get to work. So this data set shows both that gap, and another interesting thing we found was that baby boomers are becoming increasingly auto-dependent, which I don't think is a big surprise. I think most folks, as they age, they become more dependent on automobile travel. So what we found was baby boomers are becoming more dependent on vehicles, and millennials, if you look at a 5-year span, they are becoming less dependent on automobiles for their work trips. So just a couple interesting patterns that we looked at specifically for Johnson County, and we thought we would share them, and these could be important in changes in how people travel by the time this plan comes to fruition. The last few pages, really briefly, I will zip through, but they talk about commuting into Johnson County, and I don't think it's a big surprise to anyone here that there's a lot of people who commute into Johnson County. There's about 16,000 every day that come into Johnson County for work. There's about 8,900 that actually leave Johnson County for work. I wasn't as aware that there was this high of a number leaving Johnson County, so that was something interesting for me. And as you might expect, the majority of the people that are coming into Johnson County are coming from Lynn County. About 40% of those folks come from Lynn County. Another 20% come from Washington County. And of the folks that leave Johnson County, 3/4 of them go to Lynn County, and then 8% go to Washington County. Something I did not expect was that there's actually more people that travel from Johnson County to Lynn County on a daily basis than Lynn County to Johnson County, by about 600 people. Pretty close, but I was surprised by that. I thought that there would be more that came down for work at the university or whatnot. So just an interesting fact for you all. In terms of commuting within the metro area, we just wanted to take a look at what are the commuting patterns, where are people traveling from, where are they traveling from, and where are they traveling to for work. And the three largest movements, Coralville, There's approximately 4,600 folks that come from Coralville into Iowa City every day for work. About 3,000 come from Iowa City to Coralville, or go from Iowa City to Coralville every day for work. And then the third largest movement is folks from North Liberty coming into Iowa City for work. So just to give you a sense of how people are moving about the metro area for their daily work trips. I won't go through the next two slides, but they are just information on where our employment clusters are at, which is, again, important in terms of transportation. We want to make sure these areas are well served. And really briefly, the youth and transportation. We have a section here. We did something a little new this long-range plan process, and we conducted our first ever youth transportation survey, and we were able to collect information from 1,700 junior high schoolers and some elementary school kids as well. And it was just very interesting to hear their sort of feedback on how they get to school and how they want to get to school. Many of them get to school by vehicle or by bus, and we find that many of them would like to get to school, I guess, in a more independent fashion, if you will, by bicycle, or mopeds were very popular by the junior high kids and the high schoolers. But bicycle, walking, many more wanted to walk than currently do. So it was just interesting to see the disparity between how they're getting to school now and how they'd really like to get to school. So we've included that information in here as well. The last two slides, really briefly, we've included a map of existing land uses, and this has been a map that Emily Boffel put together, and it really is an amalgamation of all of the land use plans and zoning for the entire metro area, which she very beautifully stitched together, because a lot of our zoning codes are very different in our communities. And not only that, but she took it to the next level, and she used our future land use plans to develop one map that shows on the entire metro area what we can reasonably expect that land uses will look like in the future. And again, this is important from a transportation planning perspective. We want to make sure we have the right facilities in the right places to serve the land uses that we expect in the future. Last page in the background section is just a map of the metro area, and includes some information on average housing and transportation costs. So just interesting when you look at total housing costs and transportation costs and what your remaining income is, because those are relatively immutable. There's some things that you can do to reduce both of those costs, but they do vary throughout the metro area, and we just thought it was interesting to highlight the differences geographically, so we've included that. And that sums up our background chapter. It's one of our biggest chapters, really, because it's a lot of providing information and facts and statistics that we think will be useful for you for the decision-making process. The last thing that I'm going to touch on really briefly is our guiding principle number 6. And if you recall, there were 9 guiding principles that we have been using to guide the process, this long-range planning process. This guiding principle I wanted to highlight really briefly because I think it's very important, and it's safety, of course. The safety of motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians should really be a top priority in transportation planning. And we highlighted some interesting things about collisions in the metro area. So as we all know, we're a growing metro area. However, our collisions, if you look at our collisions from 2011 to 2015, at that 5-year period, if you compare that 5-year period to the previous 5-year period, we're growing in population, we're growing in VMT, but our collisions are going down, which I think is great. So our overall collisions have reduced by 2%. More importantly, our fatalities have reduced by 8%, and our serious injury collisions have reduced by 17%. So we have more people here, they're traveling more, we're having fewer collisions, and they're less severe, there's a variety of factors that play into that, but that's, to me, a very good news story. On the flip side, there have been a few trends that I wanted to highlight, and one is that bicycle and pedestrian collisions are both increasing. In the metro area, bicycle collisions have increased 13%, comparing those two 5-year periods, and pedestrian collisions have increased 18%. So I think that's something we want to be aware of. And another trend, I think, that is probably not a big surprise, maybe the magnitude of it is for folks here, but we want to be cognizant of distracted driving collisions. If you look at the data for just our metro area, comparing those 5-year periods, they have increased by 68%. A third of those are related to handheld devices, and the other 2/3 are distracted by a child, something falling, something outside the road. There's a variety of different reasons they use. But something to be aware of. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more as this data starts to become more well-known. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more educational outreach and campaigns related to combating distracted driving. But I wanted you to be aware of what it looks like in the metro area. The last section here on the backside, we've included, like we did with all of our guiding principles, some strategies to address this particular principle, and some performance measures. And this is one of the few areas where the federal government has actually outlined exactly what they want to see for performance measures, so we don't have to do a guessing game. They let us know exactly what they want to see, and what they'd like to see is the number of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, the number of non-motorized, so bicycle and pedestrian, fatalities and injuries, and the rate at which these are occurring per 100 million vehicles. So we've developed those baseline trends based on the guidance that they've provided. And a few months ago, maybe I would have said potentially in the future these might be tied to funding. They may have targets for us. I feel like that might be the direction where this is all going to be moving, but it's just really hard to say right now with all the administration and the bill in flux. So it's hard to say what that's going to be, but this one's been very clearly outlined for us. We're also just going to locally keep tabs on our number of bicycle collisions and our number of pedestrian collisions and see where those move, hopefully downward over the future. So that is the two sections I really wanted to walk you through tonight. Just to give you an update on the next steps, we are going to be providing the plan in its entirety to you at your next meeting. So this will be the last opportunity to review the entire document. You've been getting chapters here and there. I think it'll make a lot more sense when you get to see the document in its entirety. So we'll be providing it to you. We also will be providing it to the Federal Highway Administration and to the DOT in March, and opening it for public comment, for a public comment period. After we receive all of that feedback, including this board's, we will go ahead and make the updates, integrate the feedback, and we're going to bring a final draft back to you for approval in May, at your May meeting. We are required to, our due date to the Federal Highway Administration and to the DOT is June 1st. So really March, when you receive this complete document, that'll be the last opportunity for you to really dig in and provide any feedback on anything you'd like to see in the plan. Thank you for being so patient. Do you have any questions for me on the long-range plan tonight?
Darian, one I would have would be on the collisions. Can we map that?
We can, and actually we're working on, right now we're working on the metro area collision report. It's something that we use it for scoring purposes for our grant funding process, and we're in the process of working through updating that right now, and I think you're going to see there's also maps in there for each metro community that show the intersections and the mid-block areas of greatest concern. If you have any specialty requests for any types of collision that you'd like us to put together, we can always do any ad hoc collision reporting also.
It might be nice, John, for us to maybe put like our major collisions in the long-range plan. If we map all the collisions, there's thousands and thousands of them. But if we just focus in on like fatalities and maybe major collisions, that might be something good for the long range plan.
Just the pattern,
sure.
where patterns form.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And Darian's happy to entertain any more questions, but I did want to take a minute just to say that as we've been providing all these chapters to you all, like Darian said, we've also been providing them to our federal partners. We've really got nothing but positive feedback about this, and I think when we'll be done, we'll likely have one of the best plans in the state, and I've really had very little to do with that. I'm quality control, but I've been really impressed with how staff's been able to adapt all the new regulations and make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing.
Other questions for Darian?
Thanks.
I have two real quick.
Sure.
On the bicycle and pedestrian collisions, I'm assuming that those are with vehicles. Or is it pedestrian with pedestrian? Bicycle with pedestrian? I know.
I'm presuming they're with vehicles, but I did not look at each individual one.
They will be with they will be single bicycle accidents as well, but there aren't as many reported. So most of what's going to be in there, barring a very few where someone really got hurt, just riding off a trail or something. The majority of those are going to be vehicle.
With vehicles?
Yes.
Okay, I assumed so, but
Good question.
it wasn't clear.
And we can try and delve into that, but I think the vast majority will be
Okay.
car, ped, or car bike.
That's what I assumed. The other one, and I know you're way down the road with this, and this kind of piggybacks on a comment I think John made previously about colors that are used, and not suggesting that changes can be made in this at this point in time. What I noticed going through, and maybe it's age and eyes, but when you use variations of the same color, I found in some of these maps it to be fairly difficult to tell which gradation I was in. So is it the second one from the top or the third one from the top? I would encourage you in the future to think about either different colors or stripes and dots or something that maybe make things a little bit more distinct than gradations of the same color. Just
No, that's good feedback. And I'll tell you that the maps are not in their final form at all. Emily has set this up so that we can go back through when we're putting the final presentation together. We're going to come up with some more coherent color plans and tie everything together. It's sort of, this is more our draft version, so that's very good feedback in terms of the readability of the maps, because we want to be able to tell the difference between those.
because John, your comment was what in terms of colorblind
Well,
issues?
for a colorblind friendly color scheme would avoid the red green, because
Avoid the red green. Okay.
that's what most colorblind people suffer from.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is the exact kind of feedback we need, and we did take note of that at our last
And
board meeting
I
when
was going to
John
say,
mentioned that.
I think there have been some adjustments.
Yeah, and as Darian mentioned, the change in the colors of the maps is actually relatively easy. Getting them right is a little more difficult, but we'll make sure we go back through them all and make sure we do the best we can to avoid red, green.
Yeah, I
and
think
try and either separate the gradations out a little bit further, or like you said, maybe use patterns or
Yeah, and
something to
I
that
understand
effect.
time constraints and how far down the path you are and needing the final approval. So please don't take this that I'm expecting this to all be done in this particular year's version, but just whatever you can do, great, but just kind of food for thought in the future as you're developing some
Yeah,
of these
we've
things.
still got time.
Okay.
Thanks, that's good feedback.
I actually, we proved this theory at the board office a couple of months ago because the entire board couldn't see something, but the person doing the minutes could. And it all had to do, we're all 50 and she's 20-something. And, but if you take the, how do you get to school and how do you want to get to school page, on the ones at the top, I see a dark blue and a light blue. But at the bottom one, it's how high school students want to travel to school. Both those blues are identical to me. I don't know which one's which, but up above, they are different. On how junior high want to travel to school, then that's on my computer screen.
know
But
what you're talking about.
making Susan's point that when I look at the oval down here, I'm like, I have no idea which one's which.
It is a little difficult. I myself found difficulty with that too, and I thought maybe if we move that key closer to the actual colors, I don't know if it's the distance that your eye has to travel, but I had a similar difficulty with that. So we'll make a note to take a look at that as well. Good feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Darian. This is excellent. I can't imagine the amount of time and effort that's gone into it, but a lot of great information in all these chapters. So thank you to all the staff. Look forward to seeing the final version. All right, moving on to 4F, update on the Crandic passenger rail study. Brad.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick update. Not a whole lot's going on with it right now. As you remember, back in September, we had a phase 2 study and focused on North Liberty to Iowa City on the Crandic line, and the cost, they got the cost down for capital between $30 and $40 million, which was a lot better than the first phase estimate. But that was Iowa City to Cedar Rapids. Now, of course, we're down to Iowa City to North Liberty. We're looking at another study, of course. We would like to look at ridership and revenue forecast, maybe some cost-benefit analysis, financial plans, and maybe some implementation schedules to either increase service or extend the service to the Eastern Iowa Airport, Cedar Rapids, in the out years. The Iowa DOT and the Crandic have once agreed to participate in another study. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split. Us taking over, or the stakeholders here would take care of 1/3. We anticipate about the same amount of money in this study as well. Once we determine what should go into the study with DOT and Crandic's help, then we will be approaching each community and all the stakeholders here to gauge their interest, not just in the study, but in the whole program and how we should proceed. It's been real quiet, so I think it's time to reassess that commitment.
Yeah,
So-
and I think Brad's right, and he sort of gets to that in his memo. We've been kind of plodding along. We've done 2 studies with price tags around $50,000 each. Again, the DOT and Crandic pick up 2/3 of that, fortunately. I think what we don't want to do is drag everyone along. North Liberty has not participated in the second study, and that's fine. What we don't want to happen is just to be dragging everyone along and just be throwing money at a study unnecessarily. We roughly know the cost to provide that service in rough details might be between $30 and $40 million. I know that's a very rough estimate, but if there's really not a commitment from a government or otherwise, some kind of champion locally, I have a feeling we'll do the third study and then, it'll sit on a shelf, which really isn't what we want. So I think it's important for everybody to go back, talk to their city administrators, and so forth, and just find out, if we do come back and say it's $30 million, then what? And if that's something, and if we're really not committed to, doing something in the near, 5 or 10 years, it might be best just to know that we're in that $30 to $40 million range now and be okay with that. So
I get 2 things. Number one, Johnson County Board of Supervisors is working on our new strategic plan, and this is in it as a top priority. So that,
Very
I think,
good.
would show you what we think about it. And 2, very, very preliminary, but there were a variety of meetings talking about local option sales tax and whether or not the entities could come to an agreement on projects. And at various city administrators and elected officials who were in a variety of those meetings, the rail was always at the top of the list of something we thought we could agree on. I don't know that that means anyone's committed to doing it or anything else, but the only way local option sales tax would work, because we can't trade the formula, is that there's an agreed list of projects. And so while that isn't going to move forward this year because of what's happening with the school district, I think that conversation would occur about next calendar year. And so from my perspective, we have to have the study in order to know what we're looking at, to even know whether we can figure out a way to get there. Now, with the current various administrations, I don't know. I mean, we would have had Amtrak rail here, but for a governor already to Iowa City. A single person stopped that. Will the new governor be interested and the new president be willing to put more money back in? I have no idea. But what I wouldn't want to do is not be getting the information we need and then have an opportunity and not be able to take advantage of it. That's just where I am.
Dave?
This next study, if we do it, needs to be very specific. It needs to go after how much people will be willing to pay for specific services. It's got to get down to the granular level, otherwise it has no value. The stuff before has been pretty and almost useless. But I think if you came away and you knew, and really knew, not just people say, oh yeah, I'd ride the train, but would you pay this? Would you exchange this mode of transportation for this one? You need that to even talk about what kind of external funding you would need. I think that's got to be critical. If you don't do that, there's almost no point to the study.
Oh, I agree.
yeah, that would be the focus of the third study if we move forward. And I didn't want to give you the impression that I think we should stop, Janelle, but I also don't want to drag the board along. We were asked to look into this when Crandic approached us, and we've sort of been doing that, but as we come back to city administrators and ask for that to make up their portion of that third, I just haven't been feeling a lot of enthusiasm for it. So I don't know if that means we should stop asking or just if that's what it is, that there just isn't a ton of enthusiasm without having the details. So
Well,
something to think about.
You've asked us all to go back and talk about it, but my sense, at least from us, is it's not a lack of enthusiasm. It's we don't understand what's happening in the state and federal level.
Sure.
But that makes us want to be prepared even more. I mean, but we're just one entity. It's in our strategic plan we'll vote on next Thursday as a top priority. So I think that alternative transportation of all kind, and rail is one of those.
Good.
Yeah, I think we can, I'll definitely encourage Iowa City to take a look at it. I would agree with Janelle. I'd like to see the third study done, and then you kind of get to that point of saying, enough studies, either move forward or quit. And I would agree with Dave's comments. I think we need a lot of detail in this. And it takes me back to some of the projections that are in the report. When you look at population and you look at the number of people, driving into Johnson County and the number of people driving out of Johnson County, you look at that, and I know we've talked before going all the way to Cedar Rapids, and that certainly isn't going to happen in any first phase. But when you look at all those people driving into Johnson County and you look at the pressure that puts on all the entities here and the university included for parking, and if there is any way that we can get a rail system in place, and I think this comes right to Dave's point, what are people willing to pay? Not only what are they willing to pay, but the idea that they give up flexibility by, say, parking in North Liberty or parking at the airport and hopping on a train and coming down, and they don't have their car in the middle of the day if something happens. And you hear that from a lot of people, particularly if they're younger and have kids. They're not willing to use some of those modes of transportation simply because of the lack of flexibility. So I think, we have to, in the study, try and get at those things, not only the cost, but what are the kinds of things that would keep them from using it? And part of it might also be the frequency. If it's kind of rush hour in the morning and rush hour at the end of the day versus, running every 30 minutes or something like that, where, if they had to get out, they could get back to their car. I think those are real important.
And does
things
it
as well.
travel fast enough? Is it stopping every block, or is it actually going some distance before it stops?
Yep, exactly.
We need to be very careful about that we don't
Yep.
turn it into a bus.
Exactly. Yep. Good point. Other questions or comments on the rail? Okay, thank you, Brad. Moving on to number 5, other business, a report on the Severson Cup Charity Challenge. Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Walls with the MPO. I get to come and report to you each year on the fun stuff. So this year, we did again the Severson Challenge, and the various entities challenged themselves to raise. The judgment was on whether you raised more than you did the year before. And this year, as a whole, those that participated donated 5,131 items that went to food pantries in Coralville and North Liberty and to Cassie's Mittens. And a total of $3,366 were also donated to charities. And in addition, and we thought this was very creative, Coralville staff donated 578 bus passes to the Valley View Lodge. But the winner this year was the city of Iowa City, which raised $2,555 for the Joan Buxton Children's Fund. And so this year, Iowa City will have
That's a first for us, I think.
I think it is the
Yes.
first, yes.
All right.
And I just want to mention one other thing. Tomorrow night, Iowa City will be kicking off its bicycle master plan with a workshop, an open house workshop that takes place from 6 to 7:30 at the Iowa City Senior Center. I have some flyers here. Anyone is welcome to attend. I mean, a lot of people who don't live in Iowa City still bike in Iowa City, whether recreationally or commuting. I've heard from folks from North Liberty that commute in by bike. On the Iowa City website, we have if you go to icgov.org/IC bike plan, there is a survey on there that people can take, and there's also a wiki map that people can go on and point to destinations where maybe there's a lot of draw to that destination, or there's something missing in the bike network or an obstacle. They can mark routes, and anyone from any of the communities is is welcome to go on there and mark things up. If we find something on there from your community, or in the case of the university, if we find things on their property or on the school district property, we will share that data with you so you can use it in your own planning endeavors. But I really encourage people to participate.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment and thank everyone, going back to the Linda Severson Challenge. It's really a very, very nice thing we do in memory of a very nice woman. And being an Iowa City staffer, part of my job, it wouldn't be for the efforts of Chris Hurlbert at Iowa City that Iowa City would not have won. She really went out of her way to do a lot and get everybody together.
Good.
Thanks to her.
Where's the trophy? Iowa City probably wants it.
Terry's got to engrave it for us.
Thanks to,
And thanks to Terry for
thanks
that.
to
yes.
Terry for donating the trophy and engraving
Yes.
it every year.
Yes.
It looks like it needs polish.
Terry, you want to make a few words?
Yeah.
Say a few words?
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Any other business? Okay, we've got the Rural Policy Board meeting shortly, so if we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Over there. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.